Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. On the show today, Sylvia is back with more great ghost stories. Also, we have two incredible adventures from Nevada. One is a Bob Lazar type UFO tale, and the other is about a haunted chair.
Did you tell them that I'm on the show today?
Yeah, I just did.
Oh, hey, that sounds great.
It does, doesn't it? Finally, we look at the history of Rice Krispies.
Snap, crackle, pop makes the world go round.
Ron, might I suggest we play a 5-minute mystery to begin with?
That is a most excellent idea.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by The Show Must Go On. In the face of danger, accident, or even murder, that mantra has never been more true. How will we use this phrase today? Let's listen in.
Okay, on stage, everybody. Curtain going up for Act 2. Everything ready, Mr. Roberts?
All set, Jerry.
Okay, boys and girls, on stage. Ready? Stage light.
Hold it, Johnny. Hold that curtain.
What's the matter with you, Mac? You're hired to watch the stage door, not to hold up production.
Just the same, Johnny, you're holding that curtain till the cops arrive. Girl was just found murdered in the Star's dressing room.
It's murder, all right. Plain, cold-blooded murder. Cruel blow in the temple. Anybody know who she is?
Oh, she's one of the chorus line, Inspector, Sybil Lang.
I see. Mr. Roberts, I understand this is your dressing room.
That's right, Inspector, it is. Ghastly mess, isn't it?
Mr. Roberts is Johnny Roberts, Inspector, the noted tap dancer. Being the star of this show, we gave him the big room.
And you were on stage at the time the murder was discovered, Mr. Roberts?
Well, practically. I've been standing in the wings waiting for curtain.
Pardon me, Inspector, but that crowd out there is growing impatient. As long as no one can leave, I see no reason for holding curtain. People have paid plenty to get a look at Roberts.
Well, I suppose there's no harm. The show must go on.
I say, Inspector, that's sporting of you. I'll be back in 5 minutes.
The thing that gets me, Mac here swears no one left the theater all evening.
I'd vouch for that too, Inspector. You see, as producer, it's my business to keep tab on the cast.
That means the murderer is still among us. But where, then, did he dispose of the weapon? He wouldn't have risked being caught leaving the room with it on him. We've searched everywhere, and there isn't a sign of anything heavy enough to administer that death blow.
Why would a pretty girl like that be in a mess like this, anyway?
Mr. Roberts!
Confound these boisterous audiences. Oh, there you are, Jerry.
Well, what is it, Roberts? What's the crowd kicking up about?
Look here, Jerry. A star is entitled to some rights. I tell you I won't have it. They're insisting, demanding I dance. Now, you promised me. Well, it says in the contract I MC this show. No audience is going to railroad me.
You don't mean you're going against audience will, Mr. Roberts. I thought it was the public that makes or breaks you.
Not John Roberts. I'll tear up my contract first. I'll tear it up.
That won't be necessary, Mr. Roberts. That contract is going to be broken anyway. John Roberts, I arrest you for the murder of Sybil Lang.
Why did the inspector arrest John Roberts? Do you know the clue? In just a moment, we'll hear more. But first...
Okay, this one's a real puzzler. However, I do find it odd that there was nothing on the stage that could have been used as a murder weapon. I have the distinct feeling that this murder is going to come down to that fact. Also, why won't the guy dance? And why do we need to know about it?
And now let's see what the inspector has to say. What are you talking about? You can't arrest me. I'll sue.
Just a minute, Roberts. Why did you just refuse to dance when that audience gave you that commanding ovation? You're wearing tap shoes, so you can't say you weren't prepared.
Well, I didn't want to dance, that's why.
Oh, no, Mr. Roberts. I'll tell you why you refused. You couldn't dance. Those loaded taps you put on the tap shoes you're wearing are too heavy for nimble dancing. But they weren't too heavy to deal a death blow. You killed Sybil Lang. You might have walked away with the clue. Just literally walked right off with it. If that audience hadn't wanted to see John Roberts go into his act. Now I suggest you hand those shoes over as Exhibit A. You might find them a little too heavy when you walk the last mile.
Well, I guess that's a first. He almost tap danced his way through this one. I guess he really did have a really big shoe. Of course I meant show. It was kind of a grisly picture there towards the end, wasn't it? Oh well, this 5-minute mystery was brought to you by The Show Must Go On. I received this email from Lorraine Locke, who writes to us from Rockford, Illinois. Hello, Ron. Your show's the best, and like so many have said, it's different from anything out there. You've asked what my favorite segment is, and it has to be, These Are Your Stories. Some of them send chills, others just make me question my reality. My question is this: have you ever had a story that you just could not believe? And did you read it to us? Lorraine. Well, Lorraine, this one could get me into some trouble, but I have read stories that I just didn't believe. One thing I want to say is just because I have a hard time swallowing a story doesn't mean it isn't true. So I don't judge them on anything other than whether or not they are appropriate for my audience. I do reject tales with explicit language or content. Now, having said that, I remember one story that a supposed mailman sent in a few years ago. It had a monster throwing a package back at him that he was trying to deliver. In the story, he said he made several attempts to deliver it. In my thinking, the first time it came sailing back at me, I would have run for the hills. But hey, doesn't the mailman's creed say, "Never snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds"? Not sure that applies to cryptids throwing packages, though. Thank you for your email, Lorraine. It was a good one. One last thing before we move on. I am looking at doing another ghost-themed show, so I'm looking for your scary stories about ghosts. This time, I want to focus just on the phantoms and see what happens. I'm also looking for a co-host for this, so if you have any suggestions or even want to apply for the job, let me know, okay? That's all I have for this time, so let's move on with this message from Audible. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle, whatever you have, you can definitely listen to Audible on it. So what am I listening to right now? Well, H.G. Wells' The Science Fiction Collection. A couple weeks ago, we featured one of his short stories. Wells has often been called the father of science fiction, and now you too can listen to all 5 of his science fiction novels in one definitive collection. And these books are all introduced by film director and H.G. Wells fan Eli Roth. When asked, "Why do you love H.G. Wells' work?" Eli had this to say.
Because when you're a kid, you read Wells on one level. As a teenager, you discover more layers. Then, as an adult revisiting the novels, you latch onto what Wells was really commenting on and how true those philosophies still are today. That's why Wells' stories keep getting made and remade. They're more than sci-fi page-turners. They get to the heart of the human condition. It doesn't matter if the plot unfolds 802,701 years in the future, Wells's characters display such universal behavior that these themes automatically resonate. Growing up, my favorite Wells book was The Time Machine. I was mesmerized by the idea of a contraption that could transport me to any period in history. It's a primal urge to want to travel back in time, to relive the past, to fix certain mistakes, or to create an alternate timeline. And then there's the fantasy of skipping ahead to see what the future looks like, what it sounds like, what it tastes like, especially a future we'll never be alive to experience ourselves. I was captivated. I fantasized about rescuing an Eloi and battling a Morlock myself, especially since the Eloi were so close to my own name.
Now, what books do you get in this collection? The War of the Worlds, narrated by David Tennant, The First Men on the Moon, narrated by Alexander Valos, The Time Machine, narrated by Hugh Bonneville, The Invisible Man, narrated by Sophie Oquendo, and The Island of Dr. Moreau, narrated by Jason Isaacs. That is over 27 hours of great entertainment. Herbert George Wells' writing career spanned over 60 years. He was a writer of novels, short stories, nonfiction books, and many articles. As a young man, Wells won a scholarship to the Normal School of Science in London, sparking his infamous vocation as a science fiction writer. Now, if you love science fiction, you're going to love this series, and you can have this incredible collection today. Here is what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you can get H.G. Wells' The Science Fiction Collection today. Thank you, Audible. And now, it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
This story comes from Las Vegas, Nevada, and was sent in by Charlie White. I have edited this story and received a thumbs up from Charlie. We have named it The Light on Mount Charleston. Hello, Ron. I'm sending you this after watching the Bob Lazar documentary. I feel compelled to share what I experienced. Let me preface this by saying the holidays are an emotional time for our immediate family. There's been a lot of unpleasant family dinners over the holidays. So it's not out of the question that the night of Christmas Eve, I decided to go for a hike up Mount Charleston. On the evening of December 24th, 2010, I left my mom, my brothers, cousin, and everyone else behind at my aunt's house. I jumped into my Jeep and, to make a very long story short, decided to go hike up Mount Charleston, which is just outside of Vegas. Right then and there. Along the trail, the snow was hard-packed enough to walk on, and it was freezing cold. I remember it being 12:30 a.m. when I started trekking up the trail from the parking lot. I'd been hiking for maybe 3 hours when I decided to take a break. I found a toppled-over tree on the side of the mountain and sat down. The first thing I did was pull out a gas station fuel bar from my jacket pocket and tore into it. The silence was eerie. There wasn't a single sound from anything except for the occasional wind brushing against the trees. The stars were really beautiful, especially since the mountain was blocking the city lights. I reached up and switched off my headlight. It was terrifyingly pitch black. I was gazing up for maybe a minute when I noticed one bright dot moving fast. I quickly identified it as a satellite and followed it with my eyes. What happened next, and trying to explain in words, is making my eyes water and sending shivers down my back as I type this. The brighter-than-normal dot started dancing in the sky. I mean, from my perspective, on the side of a pitch-black mountain, the thing was instantaneously and effortlessly jumping back and forth along its trajectory line. It was the most shocking thing I'd ever seen in my whole life. Not only back and forth as it traveled along its path, but a few times the thing literally did a loop and then zigzag patterns. What I'm trying to explain is this. In the sky, point A is about an inch away from point B. Instead of this thing slowly making its way from point A to point B, like a normal plane or aircraft, what I was seeing was literally cartoonish. It was traveling from point A to point B in microfractions of a second. It was as if God had a laser pointer and he was moving it across the room instantly fast. Or in this case, the Nevada sky. I stopped eating and sat there watching this thing in the sky for about a minute. I had a camera in my pocket, but I was too scared and frozen to pull it out. Something I regret immensely. The bright dot danced in the sky for about 60 seconds before falling back into its static orbit. Suddenly, it shot off its path and the thing came right at me. There were tall pine trees everywhere and everything lit up like Christmas. It was the brightest flash I'd ever seen, and I was dazed. When things settled down, it was pitch dark again. I looked up into the sky, and I was alone. I believe what I witnessed that night was the spacecraft Bob Lazar describes having seen for himself. The way he described its movements and how they would only fly it on the quietest nights of the week or year, like Wednesday or maybe Christmas Eve. I will never know. I watched the skies for another 30 minutes and didn't see anything else. I packed up and walked back down to my Jeep. Charlie White, Las Vegas, Nevada. Well, Charlie, that is an amazing story. For those of you who don't know who Bob Lazar is, he's primarily known for his claims of having been hired in the late 1980s to reverse engineer extraterrestrial technology at a site called S4, located just south of Area 51. He examined an alien aircraft that ran on an antimatter reactor powered by element 115, which at the time had not been synthesized. In 2018, a feature-length documentary, Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers, was released. This documentary explores Lazar's groundbreaking claims and the devastating impact it had on his life over the course of 30 years. I've seen this documentary, and it's compelling to say the least. Most experts denounce Bob and his story. I'm not so sure. There's too much physical evidence and coincidences that make me stop and think just a bit. Thank you, Charlie, for sharing your story. It truly is amazing. Our second story also comes from Las Vegas, Nevada, but this time it was sent in by Tamara Gibbs. This is a short tale, but it is a real head-scratcher. Tamara has titled it, The Old Chair. When my sister Charlotte and I were kids, our family lived for a while in a charming old farmhouse. We loved exploring the dusty corners and climbing the apple tree in the backyard. But our favorite thing was the ghost. We called her Mother because she seemed so kind and nurturing. Some mornings we would wake up, and on each of our nightstands we'd find a cup that hadn't been there the night before. Mother had left them for us, worried that we'd get thirsty during the night. Among the house's original furnishing was an antique rocking chair, which we kept next to the back wall of the living room. Whenever we were preoccupied, watching TV or playing a game, Mother would inch that chair forward across the room towards us. Sometimes she managed to move it all the way to the center of the room. We always felt sad putting it back against the wall. After all, Mother just wanted to be near us. Years later, I decided to research the farmhouse. I found an old newspaper article about the original occupant. She was a widow who cared for 17 orphans by herself. The article included a photo of the farmhouse living room. In it was her sitting in the very chair we had, and of course, it was placed exactly in the center of the room. Tamara Gibbs, Las Vegas, Nevada. Wow, Tamara, what a cool story. Next up on the show, we'll be talking to Sylvia about ghosts and ghost hunting. One thing Sylvia said was that most hauntings are good hauntings. I guess I'm beginning to believe that. Thank you for this story, Tamara. It has just become one of my favorites. Now let's get to that episode with ghost hunter Sylvia Shults. We all love a good story, but what we truly crave is a ghost story. It's time now for Ghost Stories with Sylvia. Sylvia Shults is a librarian and author by day, but at night, she becomes a ghost hunter. Following a lifetime spent in the pursuit of the weird and the strange, her non-fiction works include Ghost of the Illinois River, Fractured Spirits, 44 Years in Darkness, Hunting Demons, and The Spirits of Christmas. We now cross over the veil and join Sylvia as she tells us more tales from the unknown. Are you there, Sylvia?
I'm here. Come on in, Ron.
Sylvia!
Hey, Ron.
Did you have a good Christmas?
I did. And I had a lovely New Year's, too.
Well, my first question to you is this.
Yes?
Did you really listen to Ron's Amazing Stories on New Year's Eve?
I did, and it was wonderful.
I didn't think you were actually serious.
Well, yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, it was warm here, so I went to my favorite listening spot, which is the vacant lot down 3 blocks from our house that we bought over the summer. And it's a place for me to go and just sit and listen to whatever I want to. And yeah, that's what I did. Can you believe we've been doing this for a year?
Actually, I hate to tell you this, but it's closer to 6 years. If you count.
If you count.
If you count you were here every month of Spooky for a long time now. So it's been a while that we've been talking about ghost stories. Now, if you had told me that when I started this podcast that I would be leaning towards ghost stories over just any stories, that I would not have believed. But it's people like you that keep bringing these spooky stories to me that has turned Ron's Amazing Stories into Ron's Spooky Stories.
People love ghost stories and they love sharing them, which is good for us.
Yeah. In fact, did you know that on last week's podcast, I had 3 listeners send in 3 Bigfoot stories?
Oh,
that was amazing.
Bigfoot's active.
Yeah, and I'm just saying 3 different Bigfoot stories.
He must not hibernate.
Maybe not. Yeah. It's hard to say. If you believe he's a big old bear, then he does.
I find it difficult to believe that a humanoid would have the ability to hibernate.
Probably
I'm just
not.
spitballing here.
Well, and the sightings have been year-round. There has not been a specific season that they are prevalent.
Okay.
So, but I do know this, is that's the first time I had enough to build an entire show around Bigfoot and call it Bigfoot Week.
Yeah.
How about that?
That's awesome.
All right. Well, before we get to anything, I have a question for you.
All right. Lay it on me.
Well, so here's the deal. We had been talking about the Villisca axe murderer house for quite some time now. And it has aired. It has been out for a couple of weeks now, and I'm going to let the listeners know. It's a fun one to listen to. You got to get over there and to Lights Out and listen to it. It's really good. But I have a question.
Okay.
So, and I'm going to try to put this in a way to make the listeners want to go find out what I'm talking about here. Okay.
Wonderful.
So during the scene, when you are all gathered around taking pictures of the meter, do you think you guys made real contact?
I like to think that we did. It's always exciting when you're doing work with a meter, or if you're doing work with a flashlight, asking the spirit to turn the flashlight on and off in response to questions. It's always exciting to ask a question and actually get a response. The hard part is, was this actually an intelligent spirit manipulating the meter or the flashlight, or was it just happenstance? Was it you just happened to ask a question and please come closer to the meter if you're a little girl, and the meter lights up? And it's hard to imagine a spirit walking closer to it. You see a light up, but is there an actual energy coming closer to the meter and interacting with it? Or are you just watching a bunch of pretty lights? It would be better if all spirits were apparitions. I mean, ghosts don't have to be apparitions. Ghosts can be a smell. Ghosts can be a feeling. Ghosts can be a meter lighting up. It doesn't have to be a wispy, spooky thing coming down a staircase. It would be so much easier if it was. But ghosts don't have to have form. Ghosts don't have to have a wispy shape. They can just be a sound. So it makes it difficult to know for sure if something is responding to your questions. It sure looks like it is, and that's exciting, but there's always that little tickle at the back of my mind going, is this something real, or am I just fooling myself?
Well, judging by the excitement in the room, a lot of people thought that it was pretty amazing.
That does really help when there are other investigators around, and your energy can build off each other, and you can say, hey, did you see that? Yes, I did. And that's the wonderful part, where you have somebody backing you up saying, yeah, you know what? I think this is something cool too. And that makes all the difference in the world.
I agree. All right. Well, Sylvia, we have an email.
Okay.
Are you ready for it?
Let's do it.
All right. Anisha Knoll from Boise, Idaho sent in this email. Hey, Ron, just found you on TuneIn Radio and love the show. I'm happy to see that you have a real ghost hunter on. So many of them are much ado about nothing. I would love to hear about Sylvia's very first experience. Now, I know that we've talked about this before, but I think you should answer that question.
I absolutely will answer that question. And thank you for writing in, Anisha. And since you have just discovered the show, I'm pretty confident that you haven't heard this story before, which is great. So I will be happy to share my first experience with the paranormal, something that I really think is beyond explanation.
I guess, can we start with something really mundane with how long ago was this?
Oh.
What time frame are we talking about? Because I've never asked that.
Okay, well, sure. Yeah, I was just a little baby ghost hunter at the time. It was around, it was in 2009. Because I was working on my first book of ghost stories, which came out in 2010. So I was still in the middle of writing my very first collection of ghost stories. So I had heard about a haunted theater in Peoria, which is, a 15-minute drive from where I work. And I went over there one afternoon to the haunted theater. I called before I went. I said, hey, I understand you guys have a ghost, because some people are reticent to talk about their ghosts, but this is a theater ghost. So, of course, the theater people are like, yes, we have a ghost, and it's wonderful. His name is Norman. So they're very happy to share their ghost stories with the public. So it's a real treat for a ghost hunter to run across somebody who's enthusiastic about their resident ghost. So I went there to visit Norman and heard of his story. Norman Endine was a director at Peoria Players Theater. He very involved in the theater. This was in the early 1960s, and he developed cancer, and he passed away very, very young. He was only about 33 years old when he passed away. So I went to the theater to meet Norman, and in the book, I talk about going to the theater and having the office manager, walk me back to the theater where the lights were on the stage. And she, in the book, I talk about her leaving me there. And actually, the truth is that I walked back with her up to the front of the theater so that she could turn the lights on, because I didn't want to stay there in the dark by myself because the lights weren't on yet. So, baby ghost hunter.
How things have changed.
Yeah. So I was on the stage, and the warm, beautiful, butter-colored light was pouring down on me on the stage, and I didn't have any equipment with me at all, so I just kind of addressed the open air. I said, Norman, I have heard that you are a resident ghost in this theater, and I would love to make your acquaintance. I'm writing a book, and I would love to tell my readers that you are here in the theater. So if you could give me some sort of sign that you're here, that would be wonderful. I listened, and I didn't hear anything. There were some boards on the stage, white pine boards, and there was a small child's desk near one of the entrances to the stage. And on top of the desk, there was a stack of like little plastic shot glasses. So I had heard of ghosts being able to move objects. So I took the top shot glass off of the stack of shot glasses, and I put it in the middle of one of these boards that was in the middle of the stage. And I said, there you go, Norman. I don't have any equipment. I don't have a camera, a recorder, anything with me. So if you're here, would you please let me know by moving this shot glass for me? It's light. You should have no problem with that. So I watched the shot glass for a while, and nothing happened. Pretty soon, a volunteer for the theater's set design showed up, and her name is Pam, and we got to talking, and she had experiences with Norman, and she shared them with me as she gave me a tour of the backstage area and told me about all the hot spots. It was wonderful learning about Norman. She showed me a portrait of Norman taken back in the day, and this guy, I swear to God, looked like a young Sean Connery. This guy was adorable. So cute. So that was fun too. It was finding out that the ghost is really good looking. So we took a tour of the backstage area, and Pam told me all about the adventures she'd had with Norman. And we came back to the stage, and I said, Norman, this is Sylvia again, and I would really like to know that you're here, and I don't see that you've moved this shot glass. So is there some way you could make a noise for me? And Pam whirled around, and she pointed up to the catwalk next to the stage, and she said, did you hear that? I said, no, I didn't.
Oh, no.
She said there was a rustle up on the catwalk. And I said, oh, Norman, thank you so much. That was great that you made a noise, but I'm sorry, I missed it. I didn't hear it. Can you make a noise for us again, please? And this time I heard it. There were rustles on the catwalk on the opposite side of the stage, and then again on the closer catwalk right above our heads. And Pam and I looked at each other with big grins on our faces, and I said, oh, Norman, thank you so much for making a noise that I could hear. That was wonderful. And I said, I have to go now. I have to go back to work, but thank you for making that noise. And because I was raised by my grandmother and raised to put things back where I found them, I picked up the little shot glass that was sitting on the board, and I went to put it back on the stack of shot glasses on the little child's desk, and the stack of shot glasses was gone.
What?
And I said, did you, Pam, there was a stack of shot glasses here on the desk? And she looks at me and the smiles spreading across her face. I go, you didn't move that stack of shot glasses, did you? And I knew she would say no because she'd been with me the whole time. And she goes, nope, I didn't move it. And we both started laughing because she told me that's what Norman likes to do. He likes to move things. And she said, to be fair, you did ask him to move the shot glass. He just moved the stack instead of that one glass. So that was my first experience with something I just couldn't explain. And it was delightful and it was brilliant.
Did you ever find the shot glasses?
Nope. I asked Pam about them later and she said that stack of shot glasses never turned up.
So they were just gone.
Just gone.
And how many other people were in the theater at the time?
At the time, there was just me and Pam and the office manager who was at the front of the house. She was in the office doing her office things.
And she probably wouldn't have any reason to come get the shot glasses and bring them to the office.
Mm-mm.
That is a great story. So where did it go from there? You kind of... Did you just go hog wild after that and just start going after every ghost in the city? Or what happened? Was it slow?
I really did. I went to the Peoria Players Theater several times after that and had several more experiences with Norman, who seems to like me, which is great. So, yeah, and I jumped into paranormal investigation with both feet. Very, very enthusiastic about it. I'll never forget, I was at the Old Bailey House with an actual team investigating it, and I had been there with a couple of friends, and we had an experience there. My friend had taken a really brilliant picture of the doorway next to the parlor, and we captured the apparition of a woman standing there. And you can see it's like looking at her from the back, and you can see her left shoulder and her arm and the left side of her skirt. And you can almost make out the pattern on her skirt. It's a wonderful picture. So that was taken at the Old Bailey House near the parlor. So when I went there with an actual team, we had night vision cameras. And we set up the cameras pointing towards the parlors. I said, this is where it happened. This is where we caught this picture. Let's put a camera there. And we had it set up that the cameras fed into video screens that were in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. So we set up the cameras and turned off the lights. And immediately the screens became filled with these glowing green orbs that were all over the place, and I just lost my mind. I said, look at all, and somebody said, Sylvia, those are dust motes. You'll see that. That's just dust floating around in the night vision camera. It's perfectly normal. There's nothing paranormal about it. I said, oh, okay. And it was at the same event that we were setting up cameras in the basement of the Old Bailey House. And the first time I went there, the time we captured the picture, I was comfortable. It was like walking around my own house in the middle of the night to get up to get a drink of milk from the fridge. It was comforting and very, very nice to be there. But for some reason, when I was there with the team, I was kind of on edge. I'm kind of uncomfortable. So we're setting up cameras in the basement, and I kept kind of cooching around so I could keep my back to the wall so nothing could sneak up on me, right? Mm-hmm. And Joanne, my friend, said, Sylvia, why do you keep going next to the wall like that? That's kind of weird. And I said, so the ghosts don't sneak up on me, Joanne. Duh. She looks at me and she said, Sylvia, you do realize that ghosts can walk through walls. I jumped about a foot. I said, great, thanks for reminding me about that.
Have you ever thought about writing a book about this type of thing, this kind of experience, these personal stories?
I actually have. That is one of my back burner projects. I've had so many wonderful experiences doing Lights Out, recording for Lights Out, that I am thinking of putting together kind of a behind the scenes look at Lights Out and some
There
of my
you
personal
go.
experiences. Yeah.
Well, the thing I love about you is the fact that when you tell ghost stories, you tell them with the idea of that these are people that have passed, real people with real lives and real stories. And when you watch the ghost hunters on TV, and I'm not just hashing out that show, I'm talking about ghost hunters in general.
Right.
They put such a scary side, such a scary slant on everything, and such a evil twist that it makes me not even want to listen to what they have to say because I don't believe it. There, I said it. I don't believe it. But your stories, I have no reason to doubt because they feel real. Does that make sense?
Oh, thank you. It does, and it's a high compliment. Thank you, Ron.
I just had to say that because I've had a lot of contact with people on email lately, and they've all been bashing the ghost hunting shows because they've just taken this evil twist turn that every show has to have something that is paranormal. And from what I understand from you, that ain't how it works. You might sit there for 18 hours and get nothing.
Mm-hmm. I have had plenty of times that I have been someplace and recorded something for Lights Out and just meh. There's nothing here. So I just scrap it and go on to something more interesting historically and more interesting paranormally. And that's what these ghost hunting shows are after, the ratings and spooky sells. But most ghost stories aren't like that. Most hauntings aren't like that. Most hauntings are just people that have passed on and either don't know it or know it and are comfortable with it and just want to hang around the place that they were happy. And that's, most hauntings are happy hauntings. Most ghosts are there, I believe, most ghosts are there because that's where they want to be. That's where they want to visit after they've died.
All right, Sylvia, I know that you brought us a story today, and it has been affectionately titled, Who's in the Barn?
Right.
Or was it
Well,
Who's
we were
in the
talking.
Barn?
We definitely decided that it was Who is in the Barn. I'm pretty good at grammar.
I'm supposed to be. I'm an editor, so I know you're right. But I love giving people grief, so I had to give you some. So tell us the story.
Oh, yeah. I'm a bear about less and fewer. Oh.
All right. So tell us the story. Who's in the barn?
All right. So Anisha wrote in about, people's first personal paranormal experiences. And I found an absolutely delightful account from a fellow writer of true ghost stories. There's an author named David Pitkin, and he is in New York. He writes about haunted Saratoga County. And in 1968, he was teaching college, and this was in central New York State. He was teaching a class on African and Asian culture studies. And one day, the lesson plan had that he was supposed to show a film about a village in East Africa where the cows had stopped giving milk and the wells were drying up. And the village shaman was consulted and revealed that an elderly woman who had recently died was not satisfied with the funeral ceremony that had been held for her. And she was making mischief around the village to let people know that she was unhappy. So the shaman ordered a new, much more lavish ceremony for this woman to satisfy her ghost. And the new funeral went off without a hitch, and the wells filled back up, and the cows were giving milk again. The village women went out and milked the cows and got gourds full of milk, and that's where the film ended. This teacher who didn't believe in ghosts was kind of at a loss to make any comments about this. He's like, this is poppycock. This is primitive people and their superstitions. And that's the line he took in class. And after class, a student approached him and she said, You shouldn't make fun of ghosts, Mr. Pitkin. They're real. We have one in our barn, and you ought to come over and hear him sometime. And this teacher said, oh, goodness, this is an A student. She shouldn't fall prey to the automatically assuming she has a ghost just because she hears noises in her spooky old barn. Oh, there's got to be some explainable event behind this. So I can help her. I'll visit this barn and I'll help her see the scientific truth behind this so-called haunting. So he decided he was going to save this bright young child from complete and total ignorance. So on a cold November afternoon, he showed up at this girl's house and she led him to the barn. And it was dilapidated. It was just about to fall apart. It was just held together with spit and baling wire. There was no, you could see the sky through the holes in the roof. There was no loft left. The loft had long ago fallen away, and it had been taken down because of an unsafe structure and whatnot. The teacher was really nervous about trying to explain away any phenomenon because he could see that this barn was pretty bare on the inside. You could see the sky through the roof, and there's nowhere for somebody to hide to make noises. And he's like, okay, well, I don't really know how to explain this. And they waited around for about an hour, and the student said, just wait, it's coming, it's coming. And after about an hour, they heard slow, heavy footsteps on a wooden floor, seemingly 4 feet above their heads, where the hayloft would have been.
Oh, no.
Clump, clump. And the teacher was startled and looked up, but there was no hayloft floor there for anything to walk on. Clump, clump, it continued, moving away from us towards the center of the barn. He said he counted about 10 to 12 of these footsteps. And there was nothing moving in the barn. And the teacher just sat there stunned. And then the footsteps stopped. And the student and the teacher looked at one another. And the student had a "see" look on her face. And the teacher goes, what else does he do? And the student said, that's it. He just walks.
On a floor that's not there.
Right. And the teacher thought to himself, all right, I've seen Hollywood movies. They're much scarier than this. This is not that scary. And they left the barn, but he was still really uneasy because he knew that something had made that noise. And the student had an explanation for it. And the teacher was not quite biting this, but he didn't have any other way to explain it. He was very perplexed about it. And he had been reading books by Hans Holzer, the very famous ghost hunter.
Oh, yeah.
And, and the next day in school, he thought about it all night. And the next day in school, the teacher asked the student what she knew of the barn's history or the history of the farm. And she said that she'd heard from a neighbor 40 years before the former owner had had a mentally ill adult son who one day went up into the hayloft, crossed to the edge, placed a rope around his neck, and jumped. Those were the last footsteps he ever made.
So it's a residual hunting then?
Yes, that would be a residual, yeah.
Wow. And what year did he hang himself? Do you have any idea?
So it would have been a late 1920s.
And so it kept going all that time?
Yeah.
Wow. See, I firmly believe in residual huntings simply because our body chemistry is all energy, yes?
Oh, yes.
And so it just is not that big a stretch that we could impress ourselves onto, I don't know, an urn, a house, whatever, our feelings, how we felt about something. And something like that, such a somber moment as that, I could see how that would be recorded and played over and over. Yeah. Imagine the amount of energy that was just transpiring at that moment. It was incredible. That is a great story.
Thank you.
And where was it from again?
Saratoga County in New York, central New York State.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Sylvia, I think it's time to talk about your blog. What you got going on there? Well, the reason I have a reason for asking that, and I think you know why.
I do, because I know you. The most recent Today I Learned was a fun little fact that I picked up. In Skamania County in Washington, it is illegal to hunt Bigfoot. And if you're caught hunting Bigfoot, you can be fined $1,000 and spend 5 years in prison. And of course, if you actually manage to kill Bigfoot and it turned out to be a human-like creature, then the cops would get involved and it would be treated as a homicide. So be careful if you're hunting Bigfoot in Skamania County, Washington.
Well, I'm so glad you told me, because I live less than 15 miles away from Skamania County, and I go there all the time. So now I know that if I see Bigfoot, I had better not kill him. So thank you for that.
Do the catch and release thing.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know if you can. Is that legal? I don't have a permit.
Ooh, yeah. You better look into that.
But anyway, I appreciate that. Yeah, that is my own backyard. So I can actually, knowing some folks there in the county seat, I am not surprised that they have a law like that in that county. It is pretty rural, and so I am not surprised that they would have. And what do you got going on Lights Out? I know that a new one dropped, I believe, this week.
Yes, there's another one out. It is my first visit to Malvern Manor in Malvern, Iowa. This was a hotel in the 1880s. Around the turn of the century, it was still a going concern. Lavish place. It is beautiful from the outside, and it's still got gorgeous architecture inside. In the 1950s, it became a nursing home, and in the 1970s, it devolved from a nursing home into kind of a halfway house for people with alcoholism, people with learning disabilities, and mental illness, and drug users. So most of the hauntings, except for the captain and a ghost called Inez, they are from an earlier period, but most of the hauntings are from the 1970s. And it was a going concern. It only closed in 2005. So some of the hauntings are very, very recent folks. So I say it's my first visit there because I am going back there April 4th of this year, and I am going to spend the night.
Huh. You know, I know something about the Malvern Manor is that this was the next stop right after the Valenska axe murder house. Was that not true?
Yes. After Valenska, I was not ready for the weekend to end.
So,
I was still all juiced up from spending the night there.
So, of course, you have to go to another haunted house. It makes total sense because most of us, might go to a bar and, drink a few, and not Sylvia. No. The way I cool down is I go to a haunted hotel. That's what I do.
And I actually made another stop on the way home to a haunted cemetery, Mars Hill Cemetery, and that is going to be the next Lights Out, which is coming up hopefully sometime early next week.
You know what amazes me is that you had only, the reason I asked the question of how long it's been, because I had never asked. You've only been doing this now. 2009 is nothing to sneeze at, but the amount of material and the amount of experiences that you have and the number of books you've written from 2009 is incredible. The amount of experiences you have. It boggles the mind. And I think it's wonderful. And again, this is good stuff, folks. When you read her books, you will know what I'm talking about. These are good stories, good, solid ghost stories that you got to read. And if you haven't, you're not doing yourself a favor by not reading her books. They're just great. There, I plugged your books too.
Thank you, Ron. You're awesome.
Well, Sylvia, I do have one big thank you today, and that's to Anisha Knoll for sending in the email.
Thank you, Anisha.
That was a good email, and it spurred a really nice conversation. So I do thank you for your email, Anisha. I appreciate it. And to Sylvia, I say, I have to be heading home again, but it has been a pleasure once again to sit here in your parlor and listen to your ghost stories.
It's always a true delight, Ron.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you.
Ghost Stories with Sylvia is brought to you by Gladys Goodies. Great treats for your dog to eat. I always have a great time talking with Sylvia. She's so good at telling stories. If you want to visit her on her own turf, head to sylviashults.wordpress.com. There you will find her blog and access to her amazing podcast, Lights Out. I will have links available in the show notes. Thank you, Sylvia. A couple weeks ago, I received a package from Gladys Goodies with treats for my kitty. He absolutely loved them. You now can get treats for your dog and cat and some really cool swag at GladysGoodies.com. And please don't forget to use our very own promo code RONS to get a 20% discount on all of your purchases. That website again is GladysGoodies.com. Thank you, Gladys. As you know, I love looking for old-time radio commercials. Every once in a while, I come across one that I've never heard before, and such is the case today. Now, have you ever heard of Rice Krispies? I thought you had. Rice Krispies were first sold in 1928. Why the name? Well, it was due to the cereal being made of rice grains that are cooked, dried, and then toasted. The side effect to that was that when milk was added, they make the recognizable snap, crackle, and pop sounds. Those distinct sounds resulted in Kellogg's new slogan and the ads such as this one.
Snap, what a happy sound. Snap is the happiest sound I've found. Me clap, rap. Snap, crackle, Rice Krispies. I say it's crackle, the crispy sound. You gotta have crackle or the crust not found. Snap, crackle, Rice Krispies. I insist that pop's the sound. The best is missed unless pop's around. You can't stop hopping when the cereal's popping. Snap, crackle, Rice Krispies. I can crackle, pop, the sound. You gotta have crackle as the pop's around. You can't stop hopping when the cereal's popping. Snap, crackle, pop makes the world go round. Kellogg's best to you.
Now, when illustrator Vernon Grant heard one of these commercials, he sat down and began to create the gnomes Snap, Crackle, and Pop that we all know and love today. When Grant brought his new characters to Kellogg, they loved it and bought his idea that very day. How about that? Did we just finish episode number 419? Must have. I want to thank Lorraine Locke, Charlie White, Tamara Gibbs, and Sylvia Shults. What you guys did was nothing short of amazing. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find an amazing number of links that should fit every need. Do you want to help the show? The best thing that you can do is to tell your friends all about it. And please, leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. This is what makes podcasts grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's amazing stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.